All right, well, welcome back to Truck Tech, everyone. This is Alan Adler, your host, and really for the last time here on Truck Tech, we're going to be transitioning the show into a new host I'll introduce in just a moment. Just a couple reflections, really, for 2 years of shows here. We've had a lot of fun doing this, and it has been, I think, interesting and hopefully fun to watch. For those of you who have, we know we've got something of an audience out there, and we're keeping this going with our new host. That will be Thomas Wasson in the new year. The idea being that Truck Tech has found a place, an audience, and also a purpose, I think. And it's been a lot of fun to be the host of it for 2 years. Really developed it, I think, kind of from the newsletter, became part of a community here at FreightWaves, and something that, does have separate content really on Wednesdays when we do this show, and then on Fridays for the newsletter. Thomas also will be taking that over. We're going to have a little bit of fun today and talk about maybe looking ahead at some of the things that we've talked about over the last couple of years. Thomas, welcome to Truck Tech, which will, after today, be all yours.
We got some big shoes to fill, but looking forward to carrying on the torch. And you're completely right. We can even talk about since the 2 years you took over the community, there's been so much changes in the space, and I'm super excited. It's bittersweet for me because I got to really enjoy reading your content, and now I get to carry that on. But it's been great. And one thing I do want to ask you is out of all the topics you've been very fortunate to cover, you've traveled around the world. We could have done a Where in the World is Alan Adler segment.
Welcome back to Truck Tech, everyone. Coming to you today from the Volvo Customer Experience Center here in Gothenburg, Sweden. Livonia, Michigan, outside Detroit. Woodhaven, Michigan. Hanover, Germany. The folks at Jamestown, New York. Brighton, Colorado, outside Denver. We are here in Boston, Massachusetts. From Kansas City, Kansas, we come to you from Berlin, Germany. It is great to get a chance when you come to a place like the ACT Expo. We're going to get a chance to talk to BJ Johnson. Welcome back to Truck Tech, everyone. A new show and a new week. I'm here with co-founder and CEO, Dakota Semler. Great to see you again. Our tour guide is going to be London Corner. We're with Brian Chambers, the president and chief operating officer of Bollinger Motors. Salim Yosevetov.
Continue bringing you content from last week's Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas.
We're going to talk with Joanna Butler. Our guest today, Mary Chan, who is the chief operating officer at Nikola. Martin Dahm, the CEO and chairman of the board of Daimler Truck, that bringing you more or less breaking news.
Out of all of that, which one was one of the biggest themes or stories that for you has stood out, or if there was like a tent pole that kind of defined it?
Well, there's two, but the one that I lean towards is autonomy, because back when Kevin Hills was still with us at FreightWaves, he asked me, and I think this might have been in 2021, actually, or early 2022, he asked me to, for a time, come in and sort of cover the autonomous space. There wasn't a ton going on then, but I saw that as something that was so new, and it had a couple of players that were predominant. They are not the ones, interestingly, who are leading the space now, but came in and started doing that more on a writing basis when I was a staff writer at FreightWaves, and then began to work it into some of the shows. And one of the early ones that we did, we went out to Plus in Cupertino, California, and that was my first ride in an autonomous truck. And then I kind of made it my point to get in everybody's truck that would let me in anyway. And then last March, we actually rode in one without a driver, and it was pretty interesting to see that develop, really.
One of my favorite videos of you is you're riding in an autonomous truck. I think one of the guys hands you like a thing of wire cutters or something, and he says, "Cut this." Oh. This is how safe our truck is. We're going to trust you to cut some lines in it while it's going.
Right, in the parking lot, I should add. We did not do that on the highway. That was Don Burnett. And Don, interestingly, was last week's guest on the show, and a very well-spoken guy who I think embodies a lot of what's going on in autonomous. He comes out of Carnegie Mellon, where so many people in this space do. Carnegie Mellon University is sort of the autonomous mafia in a way. Almost everybody who's in the space comes out of there. He had worked with, I'm giving you more than you asked me for, he had worked with Chris Urmson, who runs Aurora now, and he was actually his his grad assistant for a time. But Don started Kodiak Robotics back in 2019, I believe, might be 2018. And he was showing me, when he gave me the wire cutters, the point was to show, how reliable the system was and what would happen if something, went wrong. And the point was, in that little 5 to 15 foot move, the vehicle shut off. It stopped, right? I mean, that was the whole idea. But yeah, the wire cutters, I remember that.
And it kind of goes into this bigger trend as well. I think that you had a really great article a few months back, back when you were still writing about the rise and fall, talking about in 21, VC money was big. Everyone's throwing stuff at the wall. There's like 5, 6, 7 major players. And now our field is so much limited, but the field's still moving forward. Give us some of your thoughts. Was there anything that surprised you? I remember thinking of you in the Too Simple drama as one. So I'm throwing out a preemptive persuasion here. But, as we're kind of talking about and rounding out the autonomous segment, was there anyone that kind of stood out and surprised you, or is there anyone that you didn't expect would make it and then now they're going to, or where are we at right now in this race? Because it does look like a bunch of folks dropped out, but there's still more race to go.
Right. No, absolutely. Okay, so surprising me, I think, was Too Simple. Too Simple was the odds-on leader in this space. They were the first to do a driver-out demonstration. It went 80 miles at night from to roughly Tucson, Arizona to Phoenix. They had a lot of support vehicles around it at the time and things like that, but it did do what it was supposed to do. And at that time, I think there was no question that Too Simple was the leader. They also went with a traditional IPO to raise money. They were valued at about, I think they had a valuation around $8 billion or something like that when they came out in, I think it was April of 21. And interestingly enough, they're nowhere to be found now. They're making video games and AI-based content in China, which is just amazing, because it wasn't that long ago that we went out to Tucson, visited with them, talked to them about things that were going on, and then the layoffs began, and then the moves and the soap opera that has played out a lot in the newsletter recently went on, and it's continuing to this day. The other one, interestingly enough, and I always remind Don Burnett at Kodiak of this, is that I once wrote, is Kodiak able to keep up with the big boys? Well, now they are a big boy. Right? I mean, if you look at who's kind of in the lead, and this is in no particular order, you've got Aurora, which is well-financed. So they've got a runway into 2026, although they're delayed right now in terms of, starting on-highway driverless trucking. And then you've got Kodiak, which has started in the Permian Basin running trucks autonomously, doing fracking sand and things like that. And then you've got Torque Robotics, which has all the backing of Daimler Truck, right? I mean, that's their sort of an internal subsidiary. So you've got 3 companies that I think are kind of your leaders. Again, I wouldn't put an order to them right now. And then you've got some others that we don't know a lot about, but you've also got some very notable exits from the space. Waymo Via, kind of put mothballs on their trucking operations. Embark trucks, which looked really promising, got picked up by Applied Intuition. What was left of them, really. They ran out of money pretty much. They got picked up. And then you had, a few others that have kind of come and gone. You've got a couple out there that will bear watching. Wabi is one, very AI-based on the autonomous side. And then one that is still seemingly, even though they came out in public, they haven't said anything since, is Stack AV. They're run by the people who used to run Argo, which was the Volkswagen and Ford-backed autonomous car business. So lots of expertise out there. Interestingly, and Don Burnett mentioned this last week on the show. He said, we probably have more hope with the new administration around autonomy than we did with the current administration. Even though you've heard a lot about, maybe subsidies for electric vehicles going away, there's a lot of excitement. Elon Musk is a huge backer of autonomous, and, he's got the president's ear, certainly. So, the president-elect's ear. So, you've got quite a bit that, might be interesting. And I'd refer people back to last week's show. Don had a lot of really interesting insights, I thought.
And talking about switching gears from the autonomous space, there's been a lot of changes in the power and fuel space. One of the wild ones: electric, natural gas, hydrogen fuel cells. I want to get your thoughts on hydrogen, because early on, when I first talked to you, you were writing about the hydrogen, and you told me you're a former GM guy, and that they're working on it. And I said, how safe are these? I think of the Hindenburg, and you told me they shot the things with like a 30 caliber, or they were shooting the hydrogen fuel tanks to show, hey, look, these are safe. They're not going to, explode. Tell us, where's hydrogen right now? Is the Hindenburg, are we flying, or are we still grounded in terms of deployment?
I think you're going to have to promise me, as you take this over, that you're not ever going to reference the Hindenburg when you write about hydrogen. That's such an old thing that's out there. I mean, it was there when I was working at GM. We talked about it from time to time, and it was a 50 caliber shell, by the way, that was shot at the tank. That kind, like machine gun shell.
That's a big hole.
Anyway, the thoughts around hydrogen, it's got its issues still, and they aren't the same issues that we've talked about so much. I mean, certainly infrastructure is a problem. It's very expensive. It's slow developing. You've only got a really one company in Nikola that is making hydrogen powered fuel cell trucks right now. Hyzon is getting closer, but they're not really there yet. And they're a fuel cell system supplier more than a truck maker, whereas Nikola is, the full thing. The other hydrogen companies, some of them, I think Quantron just went into bankruptcy. Ballard is hanging on out there. They're making fuel cells, but it's hard to say that they're successful. We really haven't done much with Ballard. You might want to look into them at some point. But I would say that hydrogen is fraught right now. We did a piece about a year ago with one of the first individual fleet purchasers of one of the Nikola fuel cell trucks. And he was pretty excited at the time. And one of the reasons he was excited was he essentially got the truck for free. I mean, between incentives and things like that, it was like, hey, why not try this? Well, now he's become something of a realist about it. And it really does go to that adage that if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And that's what's happened with him. He's paying a lot of money for hydrogen. He spent a lot of time in repair shops and things like that. So, being an early adopter isn't always a really smooth path. And then finally, we've been hearing a lot, and there's some movement around hydrogen internal combustion engines. That is, an ICE engine, but fueled with hydrogen. That, in fact, could happen down the road. It's probably more likely in Europe because of some regulations that, see it as zero emission. But, anytime you burn something, you're creating nitrogen oxide, right? And so Europe so far seems to be willing to look the other way on that. The U.S. might or might not. It's hard to say. But hydrogen ICE out there still got some potential, but it all feels a little down the road. They used to say about fuel cells, it's always 10 years away. I don't think hydrogen is necessarily 10 years away, because you've got more than 200 trucks that Nikola has made that are on the road. So you have something of a beginning, but the idea of it scaling just doesn't feel like it's close.
Yeah. And I mean, talking about, you had a good point, 10 years away. Let's look at natural gas and RNG, because I feel like this took us 10 years to get here moment instead of 10 years away. I got to do your Truck Tech Special Editions with Hexagon Agility. I got to be the writer on that. One of the things that stood out through your conversations was all it took was 3 more liters. And then it looks like there's more hope. Tell us a little bit about natural gas and RNG. My favorite story is that the dairy farmers are using their cow feces to make methane, and it's turning it into a form of RNG. Where are we at right now? Are the cows coming home?
The cows are a big part of it. Obviously, so is methane capture from landfill and from wastewater and things like that. So you've got other sources. But yeah, the cows are the ones that are fun to make fun of because they just do what they naturally do. And if you capture it and you digest it properly, with digesters and so forth, you have a ready source of fuel that can mix in with natural gas in the pipelines and go right into stations and so forth. I learned a ton, by the way, working on that Hexagon project, which was a lot of of fun. There's a separate playlist up there on YouTube of the 6 episodes that, you participated in that, Thomas. I think right now that especially RNG is having a moment, no question about it, because its emissions profile is so superior to diesel and really to many things. I mean, you're talking potentially from dairy, net zero carbon, maybe 300, I'm not sure what the correct measurement is, below what a diesel truck would be. So you've got some tremendous potential there. You've got a lot of growth in RNG facilities. I think 150 new plants that came online last year to make it. The folks at Clean Energy will tell you there's potential for 40 billion gallons of RNG. That could, in fact, lead to, with this new engine we have talked about from Cummins, that could lead to, 10% or more penetration for natural gas. Now, the big question, of course, is this a transition only getting us to electrification, or is it something that will actually have a long tail? And I think that's something we really can't know yet. But we do see with this Cummins engine, which is in production over in Jamestown, New York, where one of those episodes was taped, we do see some opportunity for the Cummins 15-liter natural gas engine to be a difference maker, simply because it opens up so many more routes that the 12-liter that's the current product really couldn't handle.
I mean, that's exciting stuff, because I think we're all moving to that piece de resistance, electrification, big conversations. I recently had some F3 conversations with a company that was talking about how a lot of people think that electrification is only on the ports. Well, what they're trying to do is the infrastructure problem. And they're saying, well, if I can get some of these distribution centers in the heartland of America, they already have the power lines and the transformers, and they're trying to tack them on the side. What are your thoughts with the electrification? Because it feels like the electric elephant in the room, and I'm not going like full Edison. I'm not going to shock one here. But, as we're thinking about the conversations we just had with hydrogen and natural gas, what are your thoughts now currently on electric and battery electric vehicles?
Well, I think it's slowed down a lot, not necessarily in the medium duty space where you can make a better TCO number work. You can actually pencil it to the point where it's on par with gasoline or diesel. I think the big lift is in the Class 8 space, because, we're waiting to see, and I think this again is something that Trump 2.0 will help us figure out, is whether these greenhouse gas emission rules that are going into effect and nitrogen rules that are going into effect in 2027 are going to stay. And if they do, then the fleets are going to have to make some decisions pretty soon. Do they pre-buy and do what they've done in every other time there's been an emission change and buy last year's models and then, grandfather themselves in, or do they go ahead and take the bull by the horn and either go electric or something that will get them the kind of credits they need to have more of their fleet in diesel, right? I mean, if you're buying in California, you're pretty soon going to have to do something that looks a whole lot like electricity, whether you want to or not. And there is incentive money still at the state levels in California, in New York, in Texas, places like that can certainly buy down the acquisition cost of an electric truck, a Class 8 truck. But, that money is going to be pretty much state only. We don't expect a lot of federal support for that beyond what you've had distributed already through infrastructure and through the Inflation Reduction Act. So I think, it's still a subsidized business, and it's going to be for a long time. We have people that, for their own reasons go to electric so that they can, in fact, tell their customers, yes, I've got your sustainability issues covered right here. But right now it still feels very experimental. I guess when I think of Schneider, they've got about 100 electric trucks, Class 8 trucks, but where they have 8,000 total. So or maybe more. I don't know if that's the right number, but it's a lot. So it's still a bit of a nascent kind of approach. I think we'll get there. I just think it's going to take longer.
And it kind of ties into a lot of questions on 2027 phase 3 ruling. EPA has basically, from how I interpret it, we add extra NOx filtration. Some have basically stuck another DEF tank on it. Others are redesigning their engine. So on the diesel front, is that something where, if you have Trump 2.0 and they decide to change it and you're an OEM who's wanting to roll it out and this takes years, is there a switch you flip? Do you just say, I'm going to keep making the last one? Or is this like, when I'm locked in, I'm still going to sell this model year 2027, whether you change it or not, because I'm kind of stuck into it?
I don't think electrification is going away. I think it could be slowed down. I think so much money from those two acts I mentioned, the Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, has been distributed. You're not going to claw that back. Okay, that money's out to the states. It's going to be spent. I think the OEMs, to some extent, have spent a ton of money. They're not going to give up on this. They may slow walk it, in terms of, how much they actually do. We've got, again, just like you have with everything, you've got companies like Lion Electric in Canada that's hanging on for dear life right now, because they're a startup and it's very hard for them. But for a Daimler or a Volvo, which are committed, again, you have to remember, in Europe, they're farther ahead of North America on these things. So they're committed, they're all in, and they will bring it here as well. And they'll do it, and they'll say it's for sustainability reasons, and you can't argue with that. But the fact is, if you're investing in it for one big market, you're probably going to do it for another. And I think some of the OEMs are clearly going to do that. I think that they'll stay with it. They're not going to probably do a lot of infrastructure. They may participate. Most of your infrastructure programs like Malens in Europe and Green Lane here in the U.S. are just getting started for public charging. But I think by and large, these companies will be willing to sell you a charger, but they're probably not going to take you all the way through the work that causes you to might take 2 or 3 years to get high speed charging at your location, because there's so much that has to happen with utilities and so forth. But I think they'll be there. I think they'll be there for those who want it. I don't think they're going to be able to push it, perhaps, the way they might have wanted to.
Yeah, and final thoughts on the diesel front. Class 8 sales, the new year models on the diesel engines themselves. If I'm a big OEM, if I have those capacity slated for these much more energy, they're going to be more expensive Class 8 tractors that have more NOx reducing tech. Do I just sell them in Europe and say, all right, close enough, and then just keep my old models in the U.S. if it gets rolled back? Or am I in the point of no return where even if we see in 2026, the EPA goes, phase 3, we're going to make it phase 2.5. We're going to roll back some of this. Do I keep the same engine, even though it's more expensive? Is there any thoughts in the crystal ball, or are we still too early?
Those decisions, Thomas, are made so early that it's really hard to back away from them. I mean, the idea that, well, first of all, let's give the used to call it the diesel technology forum, but now it's the engine technology forum. Let's give Alan Schaefer and his group a bit of credit, because most of the new engines that are coming out, new diesel engines, are much better than the ones pre-2010 and that sort of thing. They're much cleaner. They're not 100% zero, of course, but they are a lot better. And I think that, knowing that, that's helpful to a point. It doesn't help you much in California, but it will help you in a lot of other places. And I think that, by and large, the decisions that are being made, because CARB, California Air Resources Board, required a version to sell in California for 2024. Well, Volvo and Packard both did it. They both made one for that. Others are, kind of waiting until 27. I don't think they're going to back off. I think they're going to go ahead as though that's going forward. The work has been done or is being done. I don't think you're going to just sort of, drop out of it. There's no point in that. But again, you might not have quite the enthusiasm for it, but you're going to go ahead with it.
And, final thoughts as well. I will talk a little bit about you. Enough about the topics here. You've had such a long, fun experience, even being a journalist, a podcaster, communities leader, from all of your time and your experiences and stuff. What was kind of some of the funnest things you got to work on, even outside of FreightWaves, even coming from your experiences at GM and then going into journalism?
Yeah, I mean, the career as it winds down now is pretty interesting. And I've had to think about that a little bit because I've been doing this for 45 years, right? I mean, in terms of a professional journalist and then, media relations person at GM for 20 years in kind of amid that, I think I've had some wonderful experiences. And it's interesting because, Thomas, this whole truck thing is only about 5 or 6 years old for me. I really didn't do this before 2018. I was a national auto writer for the AP back in the 90s and then at the Detroit Free Press, and I don't need to read my resume, but the point is I've been mostly around the car business the last 6 years, though, around the truck business and learning about it. There's obviously carryover and some similarities. I think, the best parts of this is always not so much the technology, it's the people. You find people that you really enjoy working with and some of the entrepreneurial spirit, especially around autonomy, which I think is just, fascinating because these folks, they want to tell their stories. They're not trying to hide from you usually. Some will, but by and large, they want to tell their stories. And I think, bringing this into life in a narrative sort of way and telling stories with it is always the most fun you can have. I'm probably unusual in one sense in that I went from journalism to PR to journalism. Usually one change is enough for a person, but I sort of did it both ways. But I've really enjoyed it. It's been great. FreightWaves was tremendous. 4.5 years on the staff and writing, and then this year, doing the contract work. Mostly thanks to Volvo Truck, right? I mean, they sponsored the podcast and the community. So, it's been great having them. I hope they come back in the new year. Hint, folks over at Volvo. That'd be good for you, wouldn't it, if they do that?
And I mean,
but I do think it's been,
It's been an absolute honor. That's one thing that I wanted to point out as well while we get to talk is, working these kind of jobs. We're mostly remote, but it's one of those things where I definitely want to give you thanks for all the work you've put in, and even helping out with FreightWaves, bringing that experience. Coming from automotive to truck. Is there anyone you wanted to? You gave me some earlier shout outs from folks you got to interview. Is there anyone you wanted to thank or highlight to the listeners? Over the course of this, or any shout outs?
Well, our first guest when we did this show the first time was John O'Leary, who's the CEO of Daimler Truck North America. He's a wonderful gentleman, supremely knowledgeable guy. All the folks at Daimler, I think, have been great to work with. That's not to say others haven't, but they've been incredibly generous in terms of supporting what we do, both from a travel perspective, whether it's the IAA transport meeting in Germany or the hydrogen efforts that they undertook. They've made it accessible to us in ways that we couldn't do on our own, and that's been tremendous. So I really appreciate them. Shout out to Steve Gursky at Nikola. He's got a tough job there. I've known Steve for 30 years, going back to before our GM days when we worked together there when he was on Wall Street, and he's got a tough one there. He really does. But I really like Steve and appreciate Steve for all he's done for us over time. Coming on the show at times when he could have easily said, I don't think that's a good idea. But he's a man of his word and he did it. And I really appreciate that. And there's so many others. I don't think we have time to touch on all of them, but those two come to mind.
Perfect. Alan, really, really appreciate just getting to chat with you as well. I know it's going to be fun for me to take over the show, but it would be definitely going to miss just getting to hear not only your podcast, but, getting to hear your work. And so, from the FreightWaves team as well, just want to give you a special thanks and for all your service and happy retirement. I saw in the Slack channel you were talking about Aruba. What's next for Alan Adler? Where in the world will Alan Adler go next?
We just booked that, and I think it's something that, because they say of the area in Michigan where we live that there's 4 great months that are unparalleled anywhere in the world, and then there's 8 months of suck. Well, January is one of those months, and so we just decided that we'll call it a retirement trip, but we're gonna do about 5 days in Aruba. Just put that together. Should be a lot of fun, and start to do some of the things that are fun. What I've been told, and I give my sister credit for this. She said, "Don't wait until you're too old to do the stuff you want to do." So we're gonna go do some stuff.
I'll be thinking about you, and I'll also listen to that Beach Boys song, Kokomo. Mission's one of the places here. You got to go check out everyone. Alan, thank you so much. I'm gonna toss it back over to you for one last time. Take the reins and let's land the plane, sir.
Well, you know what, everybody? Thank you so much for those of you who watched regularly and those who just stopped in occasionally. We so appreciate you. We appreciate the audience that we've built. Stay with Thomas. He's going to do a great job. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And as we like to say, we'll see you next time.